I remember playing Streets of Rage on my old Sega console. Back in the day, such beat-em-ups were very popular and we had a large selection of game titles to pick from on various platforms. Streets of Rage, Cadillacs and Dinosaurs, as well as Final Fight were my top 3, but by far not the only ones I enjoyed playing. Needless to say, I was excited to play Streets of Rage 4. Sadly, the game does not support any ultra-wide. The devs have made up excuses such as potential enemy placement issues. Naturally, this is nonsense. It would have been easy to implement at least 21:9 here. Simply make the enemies spawn a bit further back than they would normally. This way both the players who are on normal aspects as well as the ultra wide guys would not see them as they spawn. I would also be okay with limiting the distance the ultra wide player can go to the visual spectrum of the non-ultra wide player as well. Or simply having the camera focus on the center of the screen and slightly zooming out as the players go too far apart, which is how most games of this type handle it nowadays. And these are just ideas I'm making up on the go. Surely there are even better possible solutions. The point I'm making is that the devs aren't fooling anyone with those lame excuses. While the lack of ultra wide is pretty bad, I have to report a much bigger problem, which yet again makes no logical sense to me. You can only play with one more person in online multiplayer. Should you decide to play couch co-op on a single copy of the game, up to 4 people can play simultaneously. But as soon as you want to try to play online, the session is restricted to a maximum of 2 players. This is beyond ridiculous and forced me to use third-party software in order to be able to play with more than one of my friends at a time. Luckily, using a program called Parsec allows you to play with up to 4 players online by basically simulating couch co-op. We tried Steam's remote play feature but ended up having serious latency issues, so I cannot recommend that, although it is faster and easier if you have no other option at the start at least. Give that a shot. If it's not working well, switch to Parsec. Now that we finally managed to play together, I was able to play the game and unlock some characters. This is where the game delivered yet another sucker punch. You can unlock the whole roster of retro characters, but you cannot unlock the modern ones which are already in the game. Allow me to explain. At first, the game only offers you 4 characters to choose from. 2 of them are the classic Axel and Blaze, which appear in all the games. The other 2 are new ones. Later on, another classic character joins the roster, and all you have to do to unlock him is simply progress through the story. His name is Adam. You then meet 2 other characters, Shiva and Max, who are playable in previous games and can be unlocked in their retro versions here too, but not in the modern ones. The problem here is that the actual characters, in their new modern appearance, exist within the game with their full moveset and you encounter them as bosses. At first I was baffled why the only way to play them was by using the retro versions of them, especially because Shiva was my favorite character to play back in the day. But unfortunately, like I said, they exist in the game, they have their full moveset, everything. You fight them as bosses, they do all their moves, they're already drawn, animated, everything, but you cannot play them for some reason. You can probably guess that reason is DLC. I can't overstate how lame and annoying this is. They are already in the game but cannot be accessed by the player. The game has been out for more than a year and the trailer for the first DLC came out 2 months ago. So far, there hasn't even been an official release date for it. The game's story only takes 2 hours to beat, so the lack of content becomes evident fast. Before diving deeper into the game's other problems, let's address some of its strengths. The visuals are absolutely awesome. The game looks fantastic and really does the series justice. The animations of both the characters and the enemies are all well done and feel fluid as the battle continues. The music is overall very good as well. The one from the previous games was better, but this one still works and gets you in the mood to kick ass. However, since we are talking about audio, I have to mention something that annoyed me immediately. That something was the sound of the punches. Why did they make them sound less impactful? The funny thing is that if you play a retro character, you will get the retro sounds for the punches with that character. But if you go with one of the modern ones, it sounds like you're slapping the enemy more than punching them. Don't take my word for it. Listen to this comparison between modern characters in Streets of Rage 4 and characters from Streets of Rage Remake. I don't know about you, but I can definitely hear a difference in the intensity of the punches, and it kind of bothers me. Another thing that I noticed was the fact that the new characters seem to have a more limited moveset than the retro ones. Besides the fact that some of them are missing attacks, which I remember from the past, I find that their run and evasion moves have been completely removed to be confusing and counterproductive. Why was this done? You have to imagine that most enemies are walking faster than our protagonists, so oftentimes you have to chase them slowly while you cannot dash. This problem is amplified when you have to actually evade attacks and have to do so while walking slowly. It's actually next to impossible in many cases. The retro characters are limited somewhat as well, but are still way more mobile than the modern ones. In other words, if you play the retro guys, you actually have an advantage in the game. Add to that the enemies are constantly using area of effect attacks and have lots of shields and even super armor. To those of you who don't know what it is, it's when you can't stagger them with hits. They take damage but can simply hit you back or grab you or cancel your attack entirely because they're tanking the damage that you are dishing out while their super armor is active. This is something that was almost never the case in the past games, but is now constantly an issue you have to deal with. Add to that the fact that some enemy attacks will track you and you know the game is being cheap. You can't evade or block, while the enemy can often power through your hits due to the super armor I've mentioned. Our heroes can perform ultimate attacks, which give them a few invincibility frames, but these frames are almost never enough to avoid the incoming damage since they don't last very long. It doesn't help that in order to perform your ultimate, you require a star, which is a static drop item. There's no other way to charge it up with points, which really sucks because it means that playing well is barely rewarded. To make things worse, your ult's range has also been nerfed. Back in the day, those attacks were screen clearing ones. Now they only hit around the character, so there's a good chance you will miss some enemies if you perform an ultimate. Considering how limited the uses are, I find it hard to see why the power needed to be limited as much, especially since the damage is not very high to begin with. I did say that playing well is rarely rewarded. This is where I have to mention the special attacks, which are not the same as the ultimates. You can use the specials at any time, but the cost of that is losing some health. What's new is that the health which was used to pay for the attack can be earned back by hitting enemies afterwards while not taking any damage. If you get hit once, the opportunity is lost and all the non-returned health is gone. Now if you remember, for example, in Streets of Rage 3, you had this special meter which would charge up and then you could use the special attacks without losing health. This here has been replaced by just sacrificing some of your health and then being able to earn it back. This is kind of a good change. I preferred the previous system, but this works as well and actually rewards you for playing well. So I'm gonna let it slide. Another new addition is the ability to juggle enemies. As they fall over, you can keep hitting them and keep them in the air for massive damage. This feature is really cool and especially effective while playing with other players since you can really destroy your enemies. It is important to notice that sometimes they will do the same to you and there is no way of getting out of it, which sucks. After all, our guys are badasses and it's strange that some low-level goons can toss them around like sacks of potatoes. This is where I'd be remiss if I didn't mention another good gameplay change. Picking up items now has its own button. Back in the day, you had to use the attack button to pick up stuff and it would sometimes cause you to pick up something you didn't want to in the middle of a fight. This change is very welcome, however, where there's a step forward, there usually appears to be a step back as well. In this case, the weapons you can pick up no longer have a health bar, so you don't really know how long they have before they break. The old games actually showed you that, so you knew, aha, this baseball bat's almost broken, I should take that other one. Now you can't make that choice. A lot of enemy types from the previous games are missing as well. The biker gangs are now only women, which is actually pretty cool if you ask me, because they look like middle-aged women with helmets and it makes for an interesting change. However, they never appear on bikes anymore and are extremely annoying to fight due to their tracking attacks, which they will often wind up from outside of the visible spectrum of your screen. Just look at the left side of this footage. Here you can clearly see how they charge up their attacks multiple times and basically enter the screen mid-charge, giving the player absolutely no chance to react. The only reason why some of these helmet bashes fail is because the character is actually mid-combo and hits them as well as they charge in. Sadly, this isn't the only time when enemies will rush in with a long-range, heavy-hitting attack before the player even had a chance to react to it. The thing is, I enjoyed my time with Streets of Rage 4, but that was mostly the case because I was willing to look past its many problems due to being such a huge fan of the franchise as a whole. I want to support them in hopes of getting better alterations in the future, but I see a lot of really bright red flags here. The whole part where characters are not available so that they can charge you extra for them in the future is a big issue in my book. Remember when Capcom did that with Street Fighter? We were all pissed about it. That's how I feel here too. The game has a dual mode where players can fight each other in various arenas, some of which even spawn neutral enemies, making the battle a bit more interesting. But Streets of Rage is simply not designed properly for such a mode in my opinion, especially since some of the retro characters have clear advantages due to their advanced moveset. You can also play a boss rush, which is challenging and fun as well, but only serves to hammer in the game's problems with tons of AoE, boss attacks, and super armor. And of course, the short campaign, which takes between 2 and 3 hours depending on the difficulty you choose to play it at. The good thing is that you can try to challenge yourself, and if it results in a wipe, the game will allow you to restart the level with more lives and ultimates at the cost of less points being rewarded at the end of the stage. It's a really decent trade-off and one of the changes that I approve of. Still, when you draw down the line, most of the changes here seem to be detrimental to the enjoyment of the game and will end up confusing and annoying many of the long-term fans. This is naturally a very bad move, since these people are clearly the target audience. The first people who are going to flock to this game are the ones who have played the old ones and miss it. Most of these problems could be fixed with updates, but they would also change the game quite substantially, and I just don't see it happening. All in all, the devs have been really slow with updates and even slower with the release of more content, which by the way still has no official release date, just a few trailers. So should you play this game? The answer will depend on who you are. I really wanted to be able to recommend this game, but there are so many strange issues here which could have easily been avoided that it just makes it difficult for me. It's still a very fun game with friends, but you have to first get it to work if you want to play co-op with more than 2 fighters on screen over the internet. Truth be told, you could just play the Streets of Rage remake, which is not only free and superior in many ways, but it even has a lot more content than this one. But if you are willing to work through the game's issues, have a few friends who are willing to play with you, and provided you all have gamepads, because this game plays terribly on a keyboard, then you will still be able to enjoy it for a few hours for sure. At the end of the day, that choice is very individual and I leave it up to you. I've given you all the information I have, and I hope it's been informative and entertaining to you. Thank you for watching Game Filter, and I hope to see you on the next one. Until then, have a great day.